For your x-intercept is where the line crosses the x-axis. So to be on the x-axis, you'll have an x value and your y value will be 0. So for this particular graph that I just drew, the x value is 2. You have to go right 2. You don't go up or down at all. So this would be 2, 0. That would be our x-intercept. It's where our line crosses the x-axis. The y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. So this is the same thing we did last week with the b value. We always wrote it as an ordered pair. 0, and then whatever you were adding or subtracting on the end of y equals mx plus b. Same thing here, okay? It's where our line crosses the y-axis. The x has to be 0. So you don't go side to side at all when you're graphing these points. You only go up or down. Here I went up 5, so my y-intercept is 0, 5. Any questions on x and y-intercept? All right, here is example 1a. So we are going to practice finding the x and y intercept. So if I want to find the x-intercept, what's going to be the y value? 0, okay? It's always the other one that's 0. So if I want an x-intercept, I have to make the y 0. So rewrite your equation, take y out, put 0 in, and then solve for x. Now, these are really nice when it's in standard form because one of the terms should just become a 0. All right, so we're left with just 3x equals 6. So what does x equal? 2. Very good. But I want to write it as an ordered pair, 2, 0. That's my x-intercept. What are your questions? All right, next I need to find my y-intercept. Now what am I going to do? Yeah, you're going to make x equals 0. So now I'll have 3 times 0 plus 2y equals 6. You can sort of almost just like take your hand and cover up the x term and solve that equation. You know what I'm saying? All right, so remember it's kind of like y-intercept, you cover up the x term when it's in standard form. Technically we're multiplying by 0, but if you want to get a little fancy, so cover that guy up and solve the remaining equation. So the 3x goes away. 2y equals 6. What's y going to equal? 3. How would I write that as an ordered pair?
3, 0. Oh, 0, 3.
Yeah, the x value is the one that's 0, so the 0 has to come first. All right, what are your questions? Like I said, when it's in standard form, these aren't so bad. You just kind of solve 2 one-step equations by plugging in the 0 and powering through. Questions? All right, here's the next one. We're in standard form again, so this shouldn't be too challenging for us. How do I find the x-intercept? Make y equal to 0. Good. So when you make y equal to 0, this whole term is going to go away. Right? You sort of cover it up with your hand. What are you left with? X equals 7. That's already solved for you. You didn't have a coefficient with the x, so there's no dividing on this one. You're done. How does that look as an ordered pair? 7, 0. Good. Questions on the x-intercept? Let's do y-intercept. How do I do y-intercept?
0 for x.
Put the 0 in for the x. Good. So you can kind of cover this guy up. Give you a little preview of what you're going to have left over. So we have negative 3y equals 7. Then what? Divide by negative 3. Don't make it a mixed number. Don't make it a decimal. Just leave it at negative 7/3. How will I write my final answer, though? 0, negative 7/3. Wonderful. What are your questions? All right, you can see it's getting a little harder. A little. So I'm looking for the x-intercept and the y-intercept. How do I find the x-intercept? Make y equal to 0. Good. So you're taking your hand, you're covering this guy up. That's the equation you'll be left with. All right, how do I solve such a crazy equation?
Multiply by 2/3, or multiply by 3/2.
Yeah, this is where we multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So when you multiply by 3 over 2, the 6 and the 2 would become a 3 and a 1. And then 3 times 3 is where the 9 came from. Does anyone want to see that fraction multiplication? Yes. Okay. So what you need to do is multiply both sides by 3 over 2. All right. And then the 6 and the 2 can become a 1 and a 3. And then 3 times 3 is 9, and 1 times 1 is 1. And 9 over 1 equals 9. Yes, ma'am.
What do you mul or divide 2/3?
So if you divide by 2/3, how do you divide fractions? Do you remember?
You do it 2. It'd be 6 divided by 2/3, but you put a 1 under 6, and then if they have common, if like the crossways common, you.
The way we divide fractions is to flip the second one and change it to multiplication. So you're doing the same thing either way. Now, if you're using the calculator will do that for you. So it just kind of depends on what you want to type in. If you want to type in dividing by 2/3, or if you want to type in multiplying by 3/2, it'll do it the same way. All right, but we still have to write it as an ordered pair. So 9, 0. Now, as hard as that one was, the y is the complete opposite. It's insanely easy. So what happens now? X becomes a 0. Well, when you cover this guy up, I can't even cover it because there's so much going on. What are you left with? Just y equals 6. Yeah, so when you multiply that fraction by a 0, it's going to go away. The y doesn't even have a coefficient. So y equals 6. We get the 0.06. Questions? All right. Now this one's not in standard form, so it's not as easy as like covering a part up, and we gotta do a little bit more. All right. It's the same process though. How do I find an x-intercept?
X equals 0.
No.
Y equals 0.
To find the x-intercept, you can't take x out and make it a 0. We won't have an x there to solve for. So for the x-intercept, you make the y 0. Yes, question.
Can you add 3y?
You could put this in standard form if you wanted to. I I usually don't, because a lot of times when you're taking whole pieces away, when you're plugging in a 0, it actually becomes easier without rearranging things. So you could rearrange it, then make it easy, or you can make it easy, then rearrange it. You know, so it's a personal preference. If you want to put it in standard form first, go for it. That's not my style. I just put the 0 in. Did you have a question?
It was the same.
Same question. Yeah, if you want to put it in standard form, you will get the same answers. But I'm just going to go ahead and, you can still cover it up and see. It's just sometimes it doesn't work out as easily as it does in standard form. This one won't be so bad because it's just 2x equals 4 once you multiply the -3 and the 0. So what's my x-intercept? Yes?
X equals 2.
X equals 2, so the x-intercept is 2, 0. All right, how do I find the y-intercept? Make x equal 0. This is the one that's maybe a smidge harder because when you put a 0 in here, you can't just cover it up and forget about it. You actually have to leave it as a 0 because it's the only thing on that side of the equal sign. So now I have 0 equals 4 minus 3y. All right, so we want to get everything away from the y. So the next move, you could either subtract the 4, then divide by -3, or you could move the whole y term and divide by +3. Do you guys see what I'm saying? So you either end up with -4 over -3 or +4 over +3, which is the same thing. Just kind of depends on your approach. All right, so this one gives us 0 4/3. Again, don't do decimals, don't do mixed numbers, just leave it improper. What are your questions? All right, next section. Now we're going to practice how to graph these things. As always, it's the graphing chapter, right? So we got to take it back to that graph. So the first one we're going to look at is 3x minus 4y equals 12. Same process, find the x-intercept, find the y-intercept. Now we're just going to put those points on the graph and connect them. To find the x-intercept, I do what? To find the x-intercept, you do y equals 0. Good. When y equals 0, this guy's going to go away, right? So we're left with 3x equals 12. So what does x equal? 4. Perfect. So I have the ordered pair 4, 0. How do I find the y-intercept? Make the x 0. So this guy's going to go away. That gives us -4y equals 12. So y equals -3. Here is my second ordered pair, 0, -3. Now, when we graph using y equals mx plus b, or when we graph using a table, I tell you guys to find 3 points. This is the exception. When you are graphing with intercepts, you only need the 2 points. Okay? They're typically a little farther apart than the other ones when we do the 3 points. That's why this still works out to be a pretty good graph, but it has less points than the other ones. All right, so on the x-axis, I want to graph 4, 0. On the y-axis, I want to graph 0, 3. Sorry, 0, -3. Connect them, put arrows on the ends. What are your questions? All right, here's part B. All right, how do I find the x-intercept? What? Yep, you're going to make y equal to 0. So we'll be left with 3x minus 0 equals 7, sort of like covering up the y term. We have 3x equals 7. So what is my x-intercept? 7/3. What a beautiful x-intercept. Let's move on to the y-intercept. How do I find the y-intercept? Make the x equal to 0. So 3 times 0, that guy's going to go away. We're left with negative y equals 7. So what does y equal? Negative 7. Good. You just divide both sides by that -1. So my y-intercept is 0, -7. All right, to graph these. This is where it is helpful to do a mixed number or a decimal, just so you know which two numbers you're graphing in between. So we had -7/3. Well, 6/3 would be 2, right? So we're a little farther than that. So we're at 2 1/3. Did I say negative? I'm sorry, I'm getting them backwards. It's positive. So you want to go a little farther than the 2, not quite to 2.5. So that puts you right there. Just 1, 2, and then a little bit farther. -7 on your y should be just fine. Count down to 7. And then arrows on the ends. Questions? All right, here's C. 1/3 x plus y equals 2. Fun. It won't be that bad. It's going to be better than you think. Remember, one of the times you get to make it a 0, so it'll be good. All right, so to find the x-intercept, what do we do? Make y equal to 0. Good. So we have 1/3 x plus 0 equals 2. So 1/3 x equals 2. Now, how do I get rid of that multiplying by 1/3? You can divide by 1/3, which is the same thing as multiplying by 3. So my x-intercept is 6. Isn't that a lot prettier than you thought? I know. I told you it wouldn't be so bad. So our point is 6, 0. And then the y-intercept, it's not going to bother us because we're going to make the x 0. And 1/3 times 0 is 0. And look, no coefficient with the y. Already done. Boom. Was that too fast? I like the cover it up method. Boop. Just keep. So I am also going to graph 0, 2. All right, here's my graph. So I'm going to go right 6. I'm going to put a point. I'm going to go up 2. I'm going to put a point. I'm going to connect them with arrows on the ends. D, I mean, you could think of this as an intercepts problem. I always just think of these as sort of being their own thing, right? These are the special lines. Technically, though, this one has a y-intercept of 3. This one has an x-intercept of -5. This one will not cross the y-axis. This one will not cross the x-axis, okay? So what does a y equals 3 look like?
0, 3.
Yep, so you go to 0, 3.
At least two
Left
separate
and right.
ones.
These are two lines on the same graph. And then it is going to be, left or right. It's a horizontal line through the y-axis at 3.
I was thinking it was going to be like one line where it would be diagonal.
Oh, like one line, these are the intercepts?
Yeah.
No, this is a line, this is a line. This is just 2 lines on the same graph. You can put a bunch of lines on the same graph. All right, what's an x equals -5 line look like?
Go to the left 5.
Yeah, it's through the x-axis at -5. And how does it look? Yep, straight up and down.
What was the coordinate of 5? What are the coordinates for -5?
-5, 0, and then you just go, it's just a vertical line through that. Actually, all the coordinates have an x of -5. So it's like -5, 1, -5, 2, -5, 3. If you want to do like an XY chart. All right, other questions on this one? What did we learn today?
Graph is usually X and Y.
Good. X intercepts and Y intercepts. Or you could say X and Y intercepts. You could just say intercepts. However you want to word it. All right, I'm going to pass out your homework unless there are questions.